Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council meeting of January 22nd, 2013. I'd like to thank the Garden Club for the floral arrangement they always provide for our meetings. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Salazar.
Here.
Vice Mayor O'Connell.
Here.
Mayor Ruane.
Here.
Councilmember Medina.
Here.
And Councilmember Ibarra.
Here.
And we have the Personnel Board here tonight. Anna Marie Jones, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 3, announcements. We have a few announcements this evening. The city will hold a Crestmore neighborhood meeting tomorrow evening, Wednesday, January 23rd at 7 p.m. right here at the Senior Center. And the City Council will hold a study session to discuss the formation of the not-for-profit entity called for in the settlement agreement between the city and PG&E on Tuesday, February 5th, 2013, 7 p.m. right here at the Senior Center. And one more announcement. I'd like, it's our pleasure here actually to introduce to you David Waltering. He's our new Director of Community Development, and David comes to us from the city of Clayton. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to say something? All right. This is the first now. Ready? Here we go.
I do, Mayor Ruane and council members. It's my pleasure to join your staff and to work for your city manager, and I look forward to contributing to your community. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you and welcome.
Through the chair, Mr. Mayor, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that David comes from a community that I have a few family members living in. Actually, my cousin's husband was on the Planning Commission, and the good news is that they're very upset that David left. So, we've stolen another good one.
Another good one. Does he have to recuse himself, city attorney? All right, thank you. Item number 4, we have a presentation this evening and I'm going to present a proclamation for 2013 American Cancer Society Relay for Life in San Bruno. This is very important, and I'll read the whole thing, and it's not that long. Relay for Life San Bruno kickoff party. Whereas cancer is predicted to strike 1 out of every 3 Americans sometime in our lifetime, with an estimated 144,800 new cases diagnosed in California in 2012. Approximately 3,470 new cases were estimated to have occurred in San Mateo County in 2012, and 1,175 San Mateo County citizens were expected to lose their battle with cancer in 2012. And whereas the American Cancer Society is the nation's largest and most respected voluntary health organization since 1913 and has funded research which has contributed to every known method for detecting cancer and techniques for treating cancer, thereby increasing the cancer survival rates from 10% to over 65%. And whereas the American Cancer Society is a voluntary community-based coalition of local citizens dedicated to eliminating cancer as a major health problem through financial support and education awareness. And whereas the American Cancer Society's Relay for Life San Bruno is a community event that financially benefits the research and patient support programs, educationally benefits our local citizens, and allows an opportunity to network with businesses, associates, family, and friends with the same goal of making a difference in the battle against cancer. And whereas the San Bruno Relay for Life Committee is holding their kickoff event Tuesday, January 29th, starting at 5:30 p.m. at the city's Recreation Center, and at approximately 7 p.m., the committee will host a very uplifting presentation by a cancer survivor. Now, therefore, I, Jim Ruane, Mayor of the City of San Bruno, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, January 29th, 2013, as Relay for Life San Bruno Kickoff Day. And I further urge all San Bruno residents to recognize and participate in this anti-cancer campaign event. And I'll ask, Ken Ibarra, would you present this for me, please?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to defer to, we have a group of the community right here. And a Diana Nation of American Cancer Society, if we can get the group at the podium and receive.
Would you present this, Ken? Thank you.
And while they assemble up there, I just want to say every single community suffers from cancer. Either it's directly from a loved one or a friend, or they know of someone. So San Bruno, for the last, this is our fourth year, and it has really come on strong, and I'm so proud to be a part of it. So on behalf of the mayor and the city of San Bruno, this is our first proclamation.
This is fantastic. My name is Diana Nation, as Ken mentioned, and I am an employee of the American Cancer Society. I was associated with the committee last year and really getting it off the ground in San Bruno. And this really means a lot personally and professionally. San Bruno is a phenomenal community, and I am so thankful and proud to be working with all of you. So thank you so much for making this a huge success last year, and especially moving forward this year with your 40-40-40 goal. So I'm looking forward to the next few months ahead.
So the 29th is the kickoff. When's the big event in San Bruno?
April 27th and 28th
At Cappuccino?
at Cappuccino High School.
Great. Okay. We'll be hearing a lot more about it, I'm sure.
Yes.
Thank you very much, and the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Item number 5, review of the agenda. If there's no objection, I would like to move item number 11, the annual report of the Personnel Board, to right after number 8, public hearings. Any other changes on the agenda? All right. Approval of the minutes of the regular city council meeting of January 8th, 2013. Any errors, corrections, omissions? Seeing none, they'll stand approved as submitted. Consent calendar, all items are considered routine or implemented in earlier council action and may be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless requested by a council member, citizen, or staff. Any items on the consent calendar?
Through the chair. Oops.
Irene?
Thank you. I'd like to pull 7G, please.
Okay, 7G.
Through the chair.
Rico?
Items H and I.
G, H, and I. All right. Action on the remainder of the calendar.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion second on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, item 7, let's see here. 7G is appoint a representative to the board of the Colma Creek Flood Control Zone Advisory Committee. Irene?
Thank you. The wording in the discussion is a little confusing, and I'm asking for clarification, or I'll present the clarification and ask to be voted on that part. It's a 4-year term if you are a member of the city council or not. And the way this is worded, it says if I do not run or get reelected in 2015, then I would be off of this committee. But in essence, it's a 4-year term, and it doesn't matter if you're on a council or not. So I would request that I, unless it's the pleasure of the council, to remain on the 4-year term.
Okay. Questions? Any action on 7G?
Move to accept with corrections.
Second.
Motion second on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Item 7H, accept the resignation from Citizens Crime Prevention member, declare a committee member vacancy, and direct the city clerk to initiate the process for appointment of a new member.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if we can take H and I simultaneously, but both I wanted to thank and acknowledge the 2 individuals that served on these committees. And knowing that we had already just interviewed and gone through a process, I was hoping that we could maybe quickly move forward and revisit this to appoint to these 2 vacancies sooner than later.
Good. Why don't I just do I, and we can do them both together. 7 ayes, accept a resignation from the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee member, declare a committee member vacancy, and direct the city clerk to initiate the process for appointment of a new member.
Same comments as above.
Okay, any action on 7H and I?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion second. Any question? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great.
Through-
Public
through the-
hearings?
Through the chair, Mr. Mayor, as far as clarification on this and what the Councilmember Medina asked, would we be able to just go through selection with the current applications that we have, or are we required to advertise?
I'm going to have to recruit for bike and ped. I do not believe we have anybody in the pool.
Okay. Answered. Thank you.
Okay. Item number 8, public hearings. There aren't any public hearings this evening, and previous action, we move now to hear item number 11, which is the annual report from the Personnel Board.
Good evening, City Council. I'm Ed Fuentes, and I have the honor of presenting the 2013 annual report of the Personnel Board. With me here, representing the Personnel Board, is Anna Marie Jones, my Vice Chair, and has been on the Personnel Board for several years. In fact, many people in the city were hired by Ms. Jones. And she adds that wealth of information and that value to the Personnel Board. To my left is Mr. Joe Roberts, who's been on the Personnel Board for what? About 3 years. And lacking as part of our team is Ed Comerford, who could not make it this evening. Has also been part of the Personnel Board, I would say, for over 5 years. I also want to introduce, of course, you know Tammy. Tammy is our staff liaison and provides us with great support, answering all our questions, providing us with concise minutes, and helping us through a lot of the issues that we tangle with. That's our membership. This year, our accomplishments included, and continue to include, reviewing the city job descriptions. As you know, there was a lot of reconfiguration this year, a lot of reorganizations, a lot of mergers of services with different cities, so provided us with that extra flavor and that extra endeavor that we had to overcome, understanding how everything fits together. And we made it through. So far we've done, last year we did 13 for the City Council, and many of those have come to you for final approval. In addition to the 13 job descriptions, we also recommended extensions of the maintenance worker eligibility list for the Public Services Department. That's the only one that has come through for 2012. This is a function the Personnel Board does. Eligibility lists are usually active for a couple of years after the recruitment, and we review every single one if in fact they do need to be expanded after that time period. And lastly, our city attorney gave us some training, some very valuable training, and very eye-opening training on conflicts of interest. We appreciate that, and appreciate you coming to our board and giving us that in-depth knowledge. In the future, we will continue to review the status of recruitments, eligibility lists, compliance reports. We do review the EEO report that we submit once every 2 years to ensure we're in balance with the demographics of our city. We'll continue to evaluate effective recruitment processes. If there's a particular recruitment that needs a review, we ask staff member Tammy to present us how and what process was used to fill the job. On occasion, we are asked to proctor the written exams and evaluation tests for some of the candidates that do come through. And lastly, we will continue to review the city's job descriptions as they come to us throughout the year. And I believe that's it. And thank you very much for keeping us active and alive and putting us in position to be able to serve the city.
Well, thank you. Any questions of the Personnel Board? Right under the surface of this whole city are the commissions, boards, and committees which actually make this place run as well as it does, and so we can't thank you enough. It's a lot of time, especially the Personnel Board, sometimes weekends, and it's a lot of stuff, a lot of paperwork, a lot of reading, and but it's very, very important because personnel are what make up this whole city, so we can't thank you enough. Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Item number 9, public comment on items not on the agenda. It is the Council's policy to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and or action where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the Council from discussing or acting upon any matter not agendized pursuant to state law. Would anyone like to address the Council under public comment? All right, move right onto conduct of business. Our first item is 10A. We're going to receive an oral update report on the implementation of changes to the schedule for street sweeping.
Honorable Mayor, Council members, good evening. I have with me Gino Quinn, the Service Manager for Streets. In order to address concern raised by residents, in the November meeting, you directed staff to modify the street sweeping program in the residential area. The modification will be implemented in February, starting on the 4th of February next month. With this new modified schedule in the residential area, the street sweeping will happen at least 1 hour later, but not before 9 o'clock a.m. Communication and letters will go out to all of the residential area in the city to let them know of this change. If you have any question, both of us are here for.
Good. I think this will be a big improvement. Any questions of staff? Ken?
You did, I saw the website. You said February 4th it will start?
Correct.
Okay. And the stickers are going to be on all the signage?
Is the expectation that the department will receive those decals beginning next 2 days, and in the next 2 weeks, the department will be able to install them.
Good. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 10B, adopt a resolution accepting the city's comprehensive annual financial report, CAFR, Single Audit Measure A Funds Audit Report and Transportation Development Act compliance for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2012.
Thank you, and good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. This evening, the city's audited financial statements for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2012 are presented for your review and approval. This includes the consolidated annual financial report, the audit of Measure A funds, the Transportation Development Act compliance, as well as the single audit of federal awards. We are currently in the second year of a 3-year contract with the audit firm of Avernick, Trine & Day. Tonight we have Ahmad Garaba, our audit partner on our account, to provide an overview of the audit results to the City Council.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Ahmad Garaba. I am the partner in charge of the audit of the City of San Bruno. And you see a bunch of reports over here related to the city's CAFR, single audit, and so on and so forth. And I'm presenting to you, the main report that you see over here is the comprehensive annual financial report with an opinion on the financial statements included within the comprehensive annual financial report. Alongside with it, you're going to see a Measure A, which is also a report that is derived from the financial statements as well. So all these supplemental reports that you see in your package over here were all derived from that thick, big report that you see in here, which is the comprehensive annual financial report. Over and above, the city is subjected to an audit requirements related to federal funding. They have very strict rules as to what they need to adhere to when they receive federal funds and how they're supposed to spend those funds. Alongside with that, you'll see, because you're a government, we are required to look at the internal control. We are required to report to you whether we noted any deficiencies in internal control or material non-compliance with the laws and regulations. And over and above that, there's a requirement because the city is a recipient of the Transportation Development Act. It's a grant that you receive, I believe, from the MTC. They require us to go in and to do an audit on that particular funding source that the city received. But again, the main report that you see is that this big report, which is the comprehensive annual financial report. It shows the financial health of the city. It shows what they have in assets, what they have in liabilities. And these are the same financial information that you receive from the city in prior meetings. What we do is we go back in and we make sure that whatever financial information that is included in the general ledger or included in these financial statements that has been previously presented to you are fairly stated in all material respects. So we go out, we confirm the balances, we confirm cash, we confirm receivables, we vouch all these account balances to what we call an external evidence, making sure that whatever has been previously presented to you and also presented to you in this report is fairly stated in all material respect. We are required by our Board of Accountancy to issue a financial opinion or an audit opinion, and it ranges from a clean opinion to an adverse opinion, and we issued a clean opinion on the financial statements. And the same is applicable as it relates to these supplemental reports. Again, they are derived from that main report. Over and above, you see a federal compliance audit report. I don't want to make this too long, but again, they have very strict requirements as to what the city and how the city is supposed to expend those funds. There's requirements that are related to Davis-Bacon Act, paying prevailing wage, procurement requirements, and so on and so forth. We go in and we make sure that the city did adhere to those compliance requirements, and we report to you whether we had a clean opinion or not, and the city did receive a clean opinion on federal compliance. The way that we do the audit, again, as I mentioned before, we verify the account balances by vouching them to external evidence. Because you're a government, you're subjected to what we call government auditing standards. We are required to look at the internal control and look at and report to you whether we noted any non-compliance with the laws and regulations. And with the fact that we look at the internal control, we like to see segregation of functions and duties. We like to see people holding the assets are different than the people that keep in record of the assets. We look at the design and implementation of these internal controls. Specifically, we look at your cash receipts, we look at your cash disbursements, and we look at your HR function, we look at your accounts payable function, we look at your payroll function, and we like to see those functions properly segregated, and the internal control over these functions is properly designed and implemented. And we noted no deficiencies or findings related to those items. The city issues what we call a comprehensive annual financial report, which is one step ahead of a basic financial statements, and is submitted to an association called Government Finance Officer Association. And they review these financial statements to ensure that they are in compliance with government accounting standards. And the city did receive the award and has been receiving it for the past 2 or 3 years. Because you're a government, we are required to tell you whether we had any deficiencies in the internal control, and we noted no deficiencies in the internal control. We are also required to let you know if we adjusted the financial statements from what they have been initially presented to you, and we had no adjustments to the financial statements. And we encountered no difficulties in the performance of the audit. In fact, management has been one step forward in making sure that we get all the financial information that we needed from them. Significant accounting transactions, as you all know, it's the dissolution of the city of San Bruno. You see a brand new fund in here. It's a trust fund because you've been entrusted with the assets and the liabilities related to the redevelopment agency. We moved all the cash and all the other assets related to those redevelopment agencies from the city funds, and the city created another trust fund on the financial statements that had or accumulated all these assets that are to be either liquidated or disbursed back to the County of San Mateo. Significant accounting pronouncements are coming out. One is impacting everybody related to pension. It's a reporting requirement and a recording requirement, and it's not a funding requirement. You are a participant of pension with CalPERS, and CalPERS has this gigantic pension liability for every participant in it. And they calculate this pension liability and amortize it over a 30-year period. And they tell you what your contribution requirements every single year based on that amortization. Now the new accounting standard is requiring you to record that liability on the financial statements, and that's going to impact you sometime in 2016 fiscal year. There's a similar one coming out related to health benefits and or what they call other post-employment benefits. It's not yet a standard, so it's not yet required to be implemented in any given year. It's in a draft format. They're expecting some comments from the community about it, and we expect that this will be a full statement that will come out sometime soon. And again, I want to thank management, and I want to thank the city for making sure that we receive everything that we needed. We were actually able to get this thing done on time and submit it to GFOA on time. And with that, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Good. Any questions of our audit partner?
Through the chair.
Rico?
Maybe it's to you, sir, or to staff. But I wanted to bring up, we had within the report of the OPEB, we have page 73, 74 is what I'm looking at in the large book. And on 74, we have a accrued liability of $46 million, where I know it's only done every 2 years, and so 2 years ago it was at $41 million, so it's a $5 million increase. My understanding is this is a report that was required to begin in 2010, and I know for us it's a little more unique. It's complex because we're giving the money, and there's other complexities because we're going to the Teamsters in order, and it's not a direct. But what I wonder is, from 2 years from now, when it's revisited, is there going to be an additional $5 million increase to this? So this grows, and so it is a liability that is outstanding. It grows continuously, and I know it's a bigger conversation that needs to have in regards to health and welfare. But I'm wondering, in your travels, do you see this type of scenario in other cities, and is at this kind of amount that you see here?
Yes, and again, one of the items that I mentioned is an exposure draft about recording other post-employment benefits alongside with pension. And in the industry, just about to any other governmental agency, everybody is talking about that discount rate because this is a future liability. And that number that you see on the financial statements is today's dollar amount, or the June 30, 2012 dollar amount. And the new standards that are coming out is restricting the manner that you estimate that discount rate in order for you to calculate that amount. So we see that fluctuating quite a bit. And what we've seen in the past 2 or 3 years is everybody was thinking, hey, investments have been making about 7% throughout the past 30 or 40 years. But if you look at the past 4 or 5 years, investment rate of return on many of these investments have gone down to 1, 2, and 3%. So many of the actuarials are going back and saying, maybe this 7% discount rate that we've been using has been too high, and they are pumping it up by about 1% to properly calculate that amount. Again, these are estimates, and these are just future benefits that we're going to be paying. And what we're doing here is recording the estimated present value of those future benefits. With the new GASB coming out, with the new standard coming out, it's even restricting these investment discount rates even furthermore. But with the city of San Bruno and with what we've noticed as to what the actuarial had used in terms of discount rates, it's probably going to line up. Most probably it will line up with what the new standards are saying. So the city is using a conservative discount rate for those liabilities. The reason that you have a significant revision is, again, a lot of these actuaries are estimating these liabilities. They're saying, oh, well, maybe 7% was too high. I think it's 7 3/4 right now. And a lot of them are going back and revisiting that discount rate, causing that liability to go up.
Okay, thank you.
Now, this liability right now, the $40 million, or what is it, $46 million, is not recorded on the financial statements. It's disclosed, so you went to the right page as to where it's disclosed. But what we're doing is we're amortizing that liability over the 30-year period, and we're funding that amortization every single year. If we underfunded it, then we record the liability, which is typically not the case. Now, when the new standard comes out, we're going to have to put this on the balance sheet of the city of San Bruno. But that's applicable to all government nationwide, and that's what's going to happen with the new standard when it comes out.
I appreciate that detail, and I think that's something that we need to be conscientious and concerned about. That's coming up in 215, costs for health and welfare for both current and retired employees. It has a lot of variables because of the unique situation we're in, and I think that's something we need to keep our eye on as this gets closer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions of our auditor partners or staff? All right. Just before we introduce the resolution, just want to say thank you very much to Kim and her staff. Great job. Great job. They are asking for adoption of a resolution. Would someone like to introduce that?
I'll introduce the resolution.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Item 10C, receive a report and adopt a resolution accepting the annual report on development impact fees for the year ended June 30th, 2012.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Assembly Bill 1600 regulates how public agencies may collect, maintain, and spend impact fees imposed on developers for the purpose of defraying costs of public facilities. The report that is before you for consideration this evening complies with the AB 1600 requirements by fulfilling the accounting and reporting requirements and making findings for any fees that are unspent after 5 years. This report provided includes 5 fees. Water and sewer capacity charges are the first 2 fees. These are charges that are collected on new connections to the water and sewer system, water meter upgrades, as well as new connections to the system. These costs cover the costs associated with increasing the system's capacity to meet this increased demand. In addition, the third fee is a traffic and development impact fee. We do not have a general traffic and development impact fee, but rather this was a fee that was specifically negotiated with the developer related to the improvements on El Camino Real and Sneath during the Tanfran remodel. The amount at June 30, 2012 is 0. You might recall the funds were expended some time ago, and so there was a negative balance as the city had an outstanding receivable from the developer that was collected, which was finalized and collected this past year. So that account is now at 0, and that will no longer be part of this report going forward. So those first 3 fees are all privy and required to be reported under the AB 1600 requirements. The next 2 fees are the park and lieu fees and the below market rate housing fees, which are actually exempt from the AB 1600 reporting requirements. However, we've included them in this report just for informational purposes. Exhibit A to the report provides the revenues, expenses, and fund balance for the 5 fees and demonstrates that the 3 impact fees that are subject to AB 1600 have all utilized the funds received in fiscal year 2007 and 8, meeting that 5-year reporting requirement, and therefore have no 5-year reporting at this time. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Kim? Action?
Chair,
Ken?
I introduce the resolution accepting the report.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Item 10D, adopt a resolution approving up to $604,415 City of San Bruno contribution for the San Bruno grade separation archway construction.
The design for the grade separation project under construction right now started more than a decade ago. Always was the expectation of the city to incorporate on the east side in this project a gateway to mark the entrance in our community in our downtown. When the construction for the project started, the city entered in an agreement with JPB to jointly develop a design concept for this gateway on the east side of the project. The design concept was developed and presented to you, and you approved in November the concept design for the archway with some expectation to have some follow-up changes, small changes to the design, to change the design elements of the arch itself. Since then, JPB developed the cost for the arch. Oh, I am looking at it, but I am not showing it to you. JPB developed the cost for the arch. The estimated cost is $1.2 million for this project. JPB made the commitment to fund 50% of the project. The city's share of the cost would be $604,000 for this arch. Our recommendation is to fund this project using $457,000 from one-time property tax fund it received as the result of the redistribution of the former redevelopment cash balance fund, and to use for the remaining of $147,000 general fund reserve, or if you wish to use also the city's art fund, which has a existing balance of $120,000. Mark Simon would like to make a few comments, and both of us will stand for any question you might have.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, on behalf of the Caltrain staff, I'd like to join the city staff in asking you consider approving this proposal. It is the result of an extensive amount of work, as the two members of the subcommittee and the council itself all know. We worked very hard to arrive at the best estimate we can. I should emphasize it is an estimate. We do acknowledge that the council asked that the W be revisited as some other sort of architectural feature, and I can promise you that will be the case, that will direct the final design to be something other than the big W. The other question to ask is whether or not you still want colored glass in the elevator. But those details aside, this is a very carefully negotiated end result, and we hope that the council will approve it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Good. Any questions of Mark or Clara? No? Okay. Any action?
Through the chair,
Irene?
I'd like the discussion about should the money come from the general fund reserve or the city art fund, and I am putting my 2 cents worth in to not use the city art fund. My mind just went, the Culture and Arts Commission was not privy to any of this planning. They already have plans for this money. They're budgeted, and I think it would be unfair to take away their money without any consultation.
Through the chair, and then I have something else. Well, I wouldn't say it's their money. It's
well,
the community's money. But it comes to us for final approval, but they certainly give us good recommendations. They weren't privy to this and weren't involved in this discussion or dialogue, and I think that's in that aspect that doesn't seem fair. They should have been brought on board in the beginning. But again, I just wanted to kind of clarify that one point at this moment.
Okay. Anyone else?
Through the chair.
Michael?
My comments, I guess, are along the funding as well. I know that there's a lot of public support and really strong support on the council for this project, and I know that there's been a lot of iterations on this to even appease those of us that were unhappy with the original design. But it is a large amount of money, and whether it's one-time pockets of money that we're targeting for funding this or just general funds in general, I have to think about other projects that could potentially be funded by that money, and I know we don't want to target just one pocket of money, because I know that the Arts Fund does fund a lot of different projects around the city, not just one project. So I don't know that it would be fair to definitely take all the money from there. But I do like the idea of looking at funds that wouldn't necessarily be available for other projects. And if we talk about, the excess money that's in the general fund, that money could go to pave a street or to accelerate a sewer project or do some abatement work along that same street that would help to beautify and better represent the city. So I think I have a little bit of problem with the funding. It is a lot of money, and I think when we initially talked about this, the figure was a lot smaller. We're definitely getting a quality project, but at the same time, I don't think anyone anticipated that it would cost what it's going to cost. I acknowledge that the JPB was very generous in accepting half of the cost, and I know that a lot of people have been making concessions along the way, but it remains to be a very large amount of money, and I'm wondering if maybe we can go back and look at other sources. Back when the Lions Field project came up, I mean, that was another very large dollar item, and we were able to use the park and lieu funds there. And in that case, that money had to be used for something park related. We couldn't do anything else with it, and so I was a lot more comfortable with dedicating that large amount of money to that project. In this case, we could do some other things with that money, and I'm just wondering if this, at this time, is the best use of those one-time funds.
Okay, thank you. Ken?
Through the chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I can appreciate the concerns with the funding. Clara started her presentation saying that this project was 10 years old. And the mayor and I have overseen this project from conversation to now renderings and a near past halfway construction of a grade separation with the first and foremost priority of safety in our community. This is just icing, and yes, I know that the city has spent some money, the community has spent some money over these 10 years, but I have to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is by far the largest expenditure for this project, for this multi-million-dollar project that Caltrain and JPB is bringing to our community. This is a one-time deal. This is probably a once-in-a-lifetime deal. This is something that we have corrected I would say, a flaw in our community as far as circulation and transportation. Trains and pedestrians and cars don't mix, and it took us nearly 100 years to figure that out. So I feel that the funding is appropriate. I feel we have the money for this. I think it's never going to be that type of expenditure that if we didn't have the cooperation of the JPB, would have been $1 million more. I think we are getting a lot for the $600,000. I think this community deserves this after 10 years or more of designing it and being a part of it. And I do agree that we could find, the right appropriate funds, reserve funds or whatever appropriate funds to find the balance. But I think we need to move. We need to move forward. The train's rolling.
Rico, any comments? Robert, would you like to say something?
Robert Rico, 7th Avenue. I'm concerned a little bit about taking general fund money, but looking at the bigger picture or outside the box or whatever, downstream the agency that we have set up to replace redevelopment, to utilize the PG&E money. The PG&E, the millions of dollars were to serve, support all of the people of San Bruno. And one would think that possibly a small portion of that could be appropriated as a backfill for if you temporarily borrow from one fund or whatever. Now, when you decide how to spend all that PG&E money, maybe a small portion of that could be justified in being spent to, in fact, pay for a portion of the new archway. So I just wanted to throw that out as a thought as you think of the bigger picture. Thank you.
Thank you. Rico?
Through the chair, yeah, the cost is of a concern to me. How we pay for it is of a concern. I have no problem with the first suggestion. When we come into the general reserve funds, those do concern me. I understand Councilmember Salazar's comments. This weekend, I walked on the avenues on the east side and the west side of the tracks, walked to the arch where it would be, drove the car tonight coming to the meeting, and was trying to understand and visualize. I have concerns too because I look at that kind of investment, and I'm looking at the roads. I'm looking at the 500 block of 4th Avenue that this poor gentleman has been emailing and asking us for years to pave it. There's other areas I can point out. And yes, I was over on Susan Drive, and so they're everywhere. That I wonder if these monies could be used to help other areas in our community. But then there's another side of me that also sees this as a one-time opportunity, a matching contributor at this time, which honestly I don't know that if we pass this up, will it be around as we go down this path again, if we revisit it in a few years from now. I also know that that area, that community, those neighborhoods, through the BART construction, through the grade separation, have dealt with a lot. And we are also supposed to be leading by example, as we did with the dirt lot at Wells Fargo. That used to be chain link fence, and I was always saying, we've got to lead by example, we've got to clean up our area in order to ask others to do the same and invest in the community we call home. This is an area that, do we want it just to be like in San Carlos where it's just an overpass, or do we want to have some signature on it in hopes that that helps evolve other type of things, so when you drive past the arch, that maybe there aren't vacant properties, that maybe there are people that want to invest and see the opportunity for the future. So I'd like to see what we can do about the funding, but I also do believe that this may be the only opportunity to take this advantage of what we have before us and to have something there for the future. And honestly, those folks down there, we've all gone through a lot with this construction, I shouldn't say, but the whole town. And that's something that I think that neighborhood and that area really deserves.
Thank you. As Mr. Ibarra said, it started, a good 10 years ago. It started longer than that, or farther back than that, when San Bruno actually solicited the gentleman, Mr. Howard Good, and said, by the way, we want to get on board with you to make this town a lot safer, because we, for some reason, had some grief with Caltrain over the years. And that started the process. There are many, many very late meetings, rainy nights down at Bel Air School, and models being made, and pretty contentious meetings here and there to finally come up with what this city really wanted. And that's what the JPB and the whole group wanted to find out, what San Bruno wanted out of this. Not just a line where the train goes over and the traffic goes under, but a statement as to what we are all about and what we're all about going forward in this city. This grade separation, along with the arch, is making a statement that this is an anchor for our downtown. This is an anchor for a large portion of our city that, in fact, with our new planning process, our new specific plan, and all of the stuff that we're planning on, from El Camino to San Mateo Avenue to theaters to all different kinds of things, this will be an anchor, and it will be an anchor shortly. Not one that's a pipe dream on a piece of paper, but something people can go up and touch and feel. I do agree that, sure, we can always spend the money on something else. I mean, there's a huge bucket of things that need to be done in this city, and we'll never have enough money to do it all. But I think we have to prioritize some of these things and say, since we do have the money to take care of it, and I am in favor of taking it from other sources other than the culture and arts, because they worked too hard for that, and that money should go for maybe some more specific projects that they designate and we approve. But I'm all for it. I know it's like I said, it's tough. You can spend $600,000 in a wink in this city without even thinking about it and not see the results. But I think with this money here and the approval of this arch, we're going to see the results. We're going to see them very shortly, and boy, I sure look forward to us cutting that ribbon under that arch pretty soon. So I think you know how I feel about it. Anyone else? They're asking for a resolution. Irene?
Well, I'll just stop and I'll introduce the resolution.
Vice Mayor O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra. Councilmember Salazar.
No.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Great. Thank you, Mark.
Mr. Mayor,
City Manager.
I would like to just call to the council's attention that there will need to be a small correction to the resolution that you have just adopted to clarify that there will be no use of the culture and arts funds, which I understand to be the direction of the City Council based on your discussion tonight.
Okay.
Just to clarify and add a quick comment to the comments that the council made. There are no restricted funds that are otherwise available to the city, and the reason that staff proposed the funding source that we did is we thought it was the best available match of one-time funds that are not otherwise designated. So that is, we will clarify the resolution as to your action and utilize the revenues as outlined in the staff report.
Good, understood.
Thank you.
And
All right.
but it's also, as there was a comment made earlier, about looking at other things that may occur down the path. As funding
Absolutely.
sources.
Prospectively, we can certainly do that, and the council can revisit this at any time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Irene?
Mark, do you have any kind of timeline of when this is going to start, finish, looking forward to it?
As I walked by Robert Reichle, said tomorrow, we're actually prepared to begin building the foundation for this almost immediately, because it is on a critical path for the construction of the whole grade separation. It's right outside where the area where the footings will be. There's some underground work we're actually prepared to begin literally tomorrow. What you'll see is probably going to be a few months away. We still have to get final design beyond the concept. We have to get some real construction costs. I mean, this is an estimate that we had. But we can certainly report back. We'll continue, of course, to work very closely with the city staff to report all along the way, not only at their insistence, but also out of our desire. So we'll come back and report on the progress that we're making.
Okay,
Great.
great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And
Appreciate it.
Mark,
Yes,
I know
sir.
we wanted the wow factor, but you are going to take a look at that W, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We haven't forgotten that that's something you're interested in us re-examining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 10E, waive the second reading and adopt an ordinance of the City of San Bruno adding Chapter 10.25 reusable bag ordinance to regulate the distribution of single-use carryout bags by retail establishments to Title 10 Municipal Services of the San Bruno Municipal Code.
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to just check in with the council. Mr. Dean Peterson, the Director of County Environmental Health Services, is attending other meetings tonight on this topic, but was intending to be here, however late. Mr. Wayman Wong from that same department is here, but I wanted to give you the choice of either switching the order of the last two items on your agenda tonight, giving Mr. Peterson the opportunity to arrive, or at your option, simply proceeding.
I would recommend we go on to the next item and come back in hopes that he's here.
Is that all right with everybody? All right. Let's move on to item 10F. Receive a report and adopt a resolution approving the City of San Bruno Reserves Policy.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, the proposed reserve policy is before you this evening in response to previous discussions that occurred during the development of the 2012-13 budget, in which we began discussions on the creation of a reserve policy. I would like to be clear that from the start that this is what I'm viewing as a starting point for the creation of a reserve policy. I'm viewing this as a step-by-step process, and tonight, the discussion tonight is really what I would view a first step and focuses primarily on the establishment of general fund reserve funds. What I'd like to do is walk through the proposed policy and hear your thoughts and receive some direction on this policy. Adoption of the resolution this evening is not necessary. We can come back at a later date if the council desires, or we can move forward tonight with a first step, knowing that we will come back and continue to add and revise this policy over time as we collect more information. So what I'd like to do is start by going into what are the current reserve funds that we have. Just because we don't have a reserve policy doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have reserve funds. At this point in time, we have two separate funds that are undesignated general fund reserve funds. Those are the general fund reserve and the one-time revenue reserve. Both of these funds have been funded over time as a result of one-time monies we've received, as well as any type of budget surplus that might have occurred in years past would also be absorbed into a general fund reserve. And so neither of the two funds have a dedicated ongoing funding source. They have been funded over time through one-time monies. The latter two items, the self-insurance fund and the equipment reserve fund, are both internal service reserve funds that are currently funded through the operating budget. Each year, we look at what the need is in each of those departments, and we fund based on an allocation from departments. So those are reserve funds that are in place. The proposed policy that is before you this evening does not include a discussion on the self-insurance fund or the equipment reserve fund, only because those funds are currently established. They currently have a funding source. And what we'd like to do is do further research and get more information before we come back and have another discussion on what the appropriate fund balance levels might be of those funds. So to start, why do we have a reserve policy? What's the point of establishing one? It's really a financial management best practice. It allows an agency to be prepared to deal with uncertainty and the unexpected. Financial reserves demonstrate the financial stability and strength of an organization. They allow an agency to maintain good standing with credit rating agencies, and we actually saw this firsthand recently. In early December, we did a credit rating presentation for the issuance of the pension obligation bonds with Standard & Poor's, and one thing that we discussed quite a bit and that they looked at were our current reserve balances. They wanted those assurances that the city could deal with an unexpected event. So strength in financial reserves, I feel, was a major factor in us being able to secure a AA rating. In addition, they allow an agency to generate interest income, although these days it's not very much. And they ensure that resources are available during emergency situations. So to begin on the development of a reserve policy, typically you begin developing a reserve policy with the general fund reserve. It's the most visible reserve, and it's the one that is looked to most often. That said, there's no one-size-fits-all approach, and really it's a matter of walking through and analyzing some of the different factors and making a determination of what works for an agency. General fund reserves are typically set up as, they're typically established as a percentage of overall general fund expenditures. That's what you will see in most agencies. The GFOA recommends that an agency have a minimum of 2 months, 16.6% of general fund reserves set aside. That said, it can range from anywhere from that 15% level to as high as 40, 50% and above. So what do you look at in beginning to determine what is the appropriate level? You would first start by looking at the risk factors. The risk of disaster is the first item that I'd like to discuss. And the City of San Bruno sits on the San Andreas Fault, and therefore the risk of earthquake is fairly significant. So as we have learned through one of the takeaways from what occurred with the Glenview pipeline disaster is the financial repercussions and the financial implications of a disaster are significant. Just the mutual aid costs to begin with for those first few weeks in response to the Glenview fire were in excess of $6 million. In a situation in which there isn't 100% recovery reimbursement, the agency could be liable for up to 25% of those costs. So those are some things to keep in mind. The next item to think about is revenue volatility. San Bruno is fortunate to have a stable and diverse revenue base. We currently have our highest single revenue source is sales tax at just about 20%. So we are well diversified. However, that said, any major retailer leaving the city would have a major impact on the budget. So nobody's immune from revenue volatility. However, we do have a somewhat stable base, so it's something to keep in mind. The next item is to evaluate the potential for loss. What is the potential for current liability claims outstanding, and is there any potential liability for us, and are we covered for those situations? The self-insurance fund that I mentioned earlier currently has a balance of $2.1 million. That's a cash balance of $2.1 million, and that amount is actually sufficient to cover the calculated liability of our claims at this point in time. So while we can't say that it is the right level with certainty, we do know at this point in time that it is sufficient to cover our unfunded liabilities related to claims. Additional considerations include the size of the city. You tend to see smaller cities having larger reserves because they may be more dependent on just one or two revenue streams. Budget practices. If a city's approach to budgeting is to include contingencies or a lot of one-time monies, makes them susceptible to economic changes. However, the city's approach has been a very conservative approach to budgeting. And finally, looking at debt levels. We have a very, very low debt levels. We have very minimal debt, especially general fund debt. So therefore, there's no necessity from a debt perspective of maintaining a high reserve. So these are all of the factors that should be evaluated when determining the appropriate reserve level. Beyond determining the reserve level, some thought needs to be given to the guidelines for the use of reserve funds. Typically, you want to find the appropriate balance between language that provides flexibility for those unanticipated situations, but also ensures that the reserves will be there during the times they're intended for. What we attempted to do with this policy is address this by establishing two separate general fund reserve funds. The first is a general fund reserve that proposes a goal of maintaining a target fund balance of 25% of general fund operating expenditures, which would equate at this point in time to about $8.1 million, with an initial deposit right now of 20% or $6.5 million. The guidelines for the use of the general fund reserve in the proposed policy would be in situations in which there is a decrease in revenues in excess of 5% of total expenditures, in total revenues in 1 year. Now keep in mind 5% equates to $1.5 million, so that is a very significant amount, and so that's something to keep in mind of whether or not that's a reasonable number or if something smaller or larger may be of more comfort. The next would be in a situation in which there's a loss of revenues from another government entity, and the first thing that comes to mind here is another situation similar to redevelopment in which we have a devastating loss of revenue to the city. This policy would allow the general fund reserve to be utilized in those types of situations. Finally, it also allows the flexibility to utilize the general fund reserve for one-time, non-recurring initiatives of the City Council that are important. So it allows that flexibility to fund one-time projects that may have no other funding source. Second fund that we are proposing to be established would be what was called a general fund contingency reserve, and this would have a goal of maintaining a target fund balance of $1.5 million. And this fund would have no restrictions on its use. It would be flexible and allow the City Council to utilize that fund in the event that it needs to be used to balance a budget, any type of situation that seems appropriate. So this would provide that flexibility. I just wanted to give you a little bit of perspective of what some of the general fund reserve policies, the ranges are in other cities in San Mateo County. And you can see they vary pretty widely. Belmont at 20%, Brisbane at $6 million, although I don't have a percentage of their budget there, but they are a smaller agency, and I would expect them to have a far higher percentage of their expenditures reserved for. Menlo Park, well above average with the 43 to 55% range. And then the rest of the cities tend to be in that 10, 15, 20% range that we've talked about. So this just gives you some perspective of where other cities are in the county. So moving on from the discussion on the general fund reserve funds, the proposed policy includes some discussion on the development of additional reserve funds. The first of those would be the creation of an emergency disaster reserve fund with a initial goal of $3 million funding target balance. And this fund would be reserved only for those situations in which a declaration of emergency were declared, and then those funds would be the go-to source of funds for that situation. The next fund would be the establishment of a capital improvement one-time initiatives fund. We currently do not have a dedicated funding source or fund for general capital improvement projects, similar to the archway earlier. Any types of improvements to city facilities, whether they be maintenance, painting projects, so on, also any type of capital improvements to city parks, currently have no dedicated funding source. And so as a first step towards addressing those needs, the policy recommends establishing a capital improvement one-time initiatives fund with a target balance of $5 million. Beyond those two funds, it also addresses the policy to have a 25% reserve in our internal service operating funds, and that includes the central garage, building and facilities fund, and technology. And why these funds are included this evening is really because these are also critical departments that need to be able to continue operating in an emergency situation. So therefore, it would be appropriate to have a 25%, minimum 25% reserve balance in those funds. Beyond the establishment of the reserves, the policy goes into some discussion about strategies to grow the reserve funds. The idea is to allow flexibility in the language, which states at this point in time the receipt of one-time and unbudgeted revenues during the course of the year, along with any surplus that might remain in the general fund at year-end, would be added to the reserve funds in a certain order. So it would start with the general fund reserve, and if that is fully funded, move on to the general fund contingency fund. Once that is fully funded, move on to the emergency disaster fund, and so on, until we've met those obligations, those target goal balances in those funds. But the language is flexible in that it's unbudgeted funds. So this isn't to say that the establishment of a reserve policy would limit the City Council's ability to utilize certain one-time revenues to balance the budget if appropriate. It's just simply going beyond that. If it's not included in the budget, the thought would be to put it in one of the reserve funds. So that all said, I wanted to summarize what it would look like if the proposed policy that is before you this evening were to be implemented. So where we would end up is with a general fund reserve at 20% of general fund expenditures, or $6.5 million. We would have a general fund contingency fund of $1.5 million. We would have an emergency disaster reserve fund of $3 million. We would have a capital improvement one-time initiatives fund of $5 million. And we would have reserve funds in the internal service funds, central garage, building and facilities, and technology at 25%. And then also I just wanted to highlight, even though they're not specifically part of the discussion tonight because they are reserve funds that already exist, we would continue to have the self-insurance fund at $2.1 million and the equipment reserve fund, which currently has a fund balance of $6.3 million, although I would just bring to your attention of that $6.3 million, $2.9 million of that is in the form of a receivable from the former redevelopment agency. You might recall that the loan that was made from the city to the redevelopment agency to fund the initial startup costs many years ago was from the Equipment Reserve Fund, and so the outstanding amount of $2.9 million is from the Equipment Reserve Fund. We do believe that money will be repaid over time. However, one caveat to that is 20% of it will have to go towards low and moderate income housing initiatives per the legislation, so we will not see the entire 2.9 back in there, but that's for another discussion. So that just summarizes where we would be at the end of the day with this policy. So with that, I'd like to hand it over for discussion and be happy to answer any questions.
Good. Any questions of Kim?
Just, if I could.
Ken?
In the staff report, Kim, there was a brief discussion about the questioning the self-insurance fund, whether that was at a level that staff felt was appropriate, or is that something we should also consider?
Yes, I would say that the fund at this point in time, I'm comfortable, and I think it's sufficient for now at the balance, because it is sufficient to cover what is our calculated liability. However, it would make sense and for us to look at that further and see if that reserve is sufficient, if we need to consider reserving for any additional potential losses. And the plan would be to come back and discuss that further in addition to the equipment replacement fund at some point in time.
Rico? No question? Good. Michael? Irene?
No, I've seen this a few times, but
Yeah.
I did have one question about the Building and Facility Reserve Fund. The buildings and facilities that are addressed in that fund are what we would consider general fund facilities, not enterprise facilities. And the enterprise facilities would be funded by an enterprise fund? Is that correct?
Well, the Building and Facilities Fund, it does include an allocation from some of the enterprise funds. And what this Building and Facilities Reserve Fund, I want to be clear that this is really the operating fund for the ongoing maintenance of city facilities. It is not a replacement. It isn't currently set up to serve as a replacement fund for the facilities, but rather to ensure that they can be maintained on an ongoing basis. And so, because it's an operating department and it does serve all the enterprise funds as well, it is partially funded through enterprise funds.
But would the maintenance of all of our facilities be covered in that?
Yes, at this time, the way it's structured, yes.
The way it's structured. Okay, thank you.
Ken?
So, for example, I think it's a lot clearer if you give an example of what we would use it for. If we didn't have funding to paint City Hall, would that be the first reserve fund? And if we had the Building and Facilities Reserve Fund, would that be the first fund we may consider?
So the Building and Facilities Fund does not have any restrictions on it at this time. It's funded through an internal allocation from all the user departments. And so that includes not only general fund departments, but it includes the enterprise fund departments. But the money that is sitting in the Building and Facilities Fund can be utilized for projects such as the painting projects. There's no restrictions on those funds.
Let me see if I could address what it might be a little bit of confusion here. The Building and Facilities Fund is an operating fund, and it is the allocations from the various departments, including the enterprise funds, are made in an amount which is intended to cover basic operating costs. And that would include pretty minor types of normal repair and maintenance of those buildings. It would not, for example, include what might be considered a more major type of repair or maintenance project, such as a roof replacement, such as exterior building painting of, say, City Hall, one of our larger buildings. Nothing of a significant dollar amount is intended to be funded through the Building and Facilities Operating Fund. So I think to answer your question, Councilmember Salazar, more precisely, a major repair or replacement or maintenance project at an enterprise facility, a well, for example, would be funded by enterprise funds through the capital budget. a similar major repair, a roof replacement at a fire station, a painting of the exterior of City Hall, some other more significant dollar value, a capital repair, maintenance, or replacement cost for a general fund, a non-enterprise facility, City Hall, the rec center, parks, those types of things would not be, has no dedicated funding source. And it would be the general intent of this policy to fund or to have funds, a limited amount of funds, available through the capital reserve in order to be able to at least have some money available to go to for those types of issues. I hope that helps.
Okay, yeah, it definitely helps, and the amount just seemed low to me. And even if it only covers minor things, I think as the plant ages, I'm sure the yearly expenses of keeping things running is actually going to increase, I would imagine, just because you have to fix more things start falling apart.
You're talking about the Building and Facilities Fund.
Still.
So for example, if there's a repair needed to a sink or a tile comes off of the wall in the restroom, those types of really pretty simple and inexpensive repairs are generally captured in day-to-day activities funded by the Building and Facilities Reserve, or the Building and Facilities Fund. Where the city's main, I would say, exposure to cost, it really comes at those bigger ticket items for our major facility, this building, for example, the many city facilities that we rely on an everyday basis for normal activities, should they need, and they will need at some point, all of them, major repairs and replacement. That's what the capital reserve is intended to begin to address. But even at $5 million or $8 million, we're a long, long ways from having funds available to do what over the life cycle of those buildings will need to be done.
Okay. And just another clarification, all of the fund balances that are proposed here, they currently exist. We currently have those balances. So, thank you.
Okay, Rico?
Through the chair. This is one thing that is some good news, and I think it's a policy we need to establish. I also know that this is something that we can modify and change over time. This is just embarking upon some foundation, some groundwork. I would, I know when I came in, God, it's not just yesterday anymore, but in 06, we had maybe about a little under 5.9 million in reserves. Now that's double. Nothing to be sorry for. I think that's sound responsibility, planning for unforeseen circumstances. And I always remember, if we had a Madison mudslide or a Claremont, it doesn't take much to deplete $5-point-something million. And as we learned with the disaster, as you indicated, if we were responsible for 25%, what that would have cost. So I think we need to be extremely mindful. I'm still always on the view of being more conservative with this. It's always better to have and worry about having too much than not having enough. I believe that we should bring this back up at the budget study session to review this document, see where we're at today, where we're at then, where we should be going forward so we can review it. And I know you're looking forward to budget. It's just around the corner. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Good. Okay. Ken?
With all that said, I think I agree. It's great to have the nest egg. The thing is that we really don't know, the status of a lot of our facilities. We don't know what things we may have to anticipate. I think that's something that we, not necessarily nuts and bolts, but I think we need to hear from, have some sort of updated report as to where we are in certain things. And I was speaking to the manager earlier, and I know we bought some time on the pool. We resurfaced the swimming pool, and so that's something that we may not have to, use so much funds in repairing. But roofs, I mean, roofs are always deteriorating, and it's not cheap because we have some large facilities, and it's just the sheer volume. So I think if we have an idea of where we are in the life of some of our facilities, then we can sort of gauge or establish our priorities on something like a capital improvement, one-time fund. So I think that's also has to be part of the dialogue in establishing these funds.
Okay. Anyone else?
Through the chair.
Irene?
Thank you. I agree. I think it's very prudent what we're doing. I'm encouraged that you've put so much thought, the staff has put so much thought into what you've done here. I would like us to also hold off and re-examine this during the budget time. I think one of the things I'd like to see is some mechanism or some thought given to how to allocate for just the things that the rest of the council has been speaking of. So this building is going to need a new roof. It's probably going to cost generally, $200,000, say. So and say it's going to be in 10 years. So should this facility put aside X amount of money, above and beyond what we're doing, some way to allocate from each facility to fund the things that are going to happen. I know way back when we used to just have a general fund reserve, and that took care of everything, and it got kind of dicey about who got what and how much went where, and then we started allocating costs from each department to replenish different replenish the equipment reserve fund was one, and to just allocate, like, to the city attorney's time to reallocate back the cost of his time for each different department. So there might be some way to look at how to fund these separate reserve funds in that manner, instead of just kind of waiting for one-time money and allocating it out that way. So I'd like us to try to develop some suggestions for that during the budget time.
Good.
Years ago, we had created a fund for an archway.
That's right. Very true.
Actually, we'll see that. Just on that comment, that's we had no Culture and Arts Commission, and we had no Culture and Arts Commission money until we established that and established how to fund it, which was totally separate from the general funds. So that was, I think, some good thought went into doing that, and I think it was a very positive thing, and pretty painless to the residents of San Bruno. So I think we can keep on doing that, just like the technology fund that was added to the costs for the different permits and the printing out of whatever we're doing and stuff. So anyway, I think it's a direction to take.
Yeah, I was the second member on the committee with Councilmember Salazar, and this is definitely some good stuff going forward. It's always good to know what you have, especially if you don't know what's coming after. So this is good. It's great. And a lot of work went into this with Kim and her staff too, so I appreciate that once again. So we have received a report, and they're asking for a resolution to be adopted this evening, with the understanding, of course, that we're going to fine-tune it as we go forward.
We'll go ahead and move to introduce the resolution, please.
You mumbled.
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.
I'll be more clear next time. Usually I don't.
All right, we're going to revisit item 10E. I see Mr. Dean Peterson has joined us. So that is to waive a second reading and adopt an ordinance of the City of San Bruno adding Chapter 10.25 Reusable Bag Ordinance to regulate the distribution of single-use carry-out bags by retail establishments to Title 10 Municipal Services of the San Bruno Municipal Code.
Thank you. The City Council at its January 8th meeting introduced the reusable bag ordinance. And since that meeting, staff has hosted an informational meeting for retailers as well as an informational meeting for residents. Several business representatives attended that retail informational meeting, and unfortunately, we did not have any residents attend the community informational meeting. The question that staff has received from the business owner are mostly clarifying the ordinance, trying to get a better understanding of the exemptions, as well as the applicability. Very specific questions. How does this ordinance apply to my business specific are the questions that we're receiving. We have received one comment from a resident expressing concern with the ordinance. As we indicated at the last meeting, the ordinance does apply to all retail establishments, and that includes grocery stores as well as a department store. And as noted at your last meeting, restaurants would be exempt from this ordinance, as well as produce bags that don't have a handle on them and that are used to protect food. Plastic bags that, as well, that do not have a handle, like a garment bag or a dry cleaning bag, are also exempt from the ordinance. The county will be distributing toolkits to San Bruno businesses by the end of this month to assist with implementation and outreach. And city and county staff will be making personal visits to businesses to also assist them with implementation. Staff will continue to outreach to residents with an informational flyer in the utility bill insert, as well as hosting an additional informational meeting on March 21st in the evening. Just want to point out that I believe 2 copies of the ordinance were inadvertently included. You only need to adopt 1 copy of this ordinance. Dean Peterson, as well as Wayman Wong, are here from the County Environmental Health Department, and together we would be happy to try to answer any of your questions.
Good. Any questions? Ken?
All right, I'm going to throw my scenarios at. First, did you get any correspondence, any questions from department stores like Penny's, Sears, Target?
I have not heard directly from the larger retail establishments. I have spoken with a number of the smaller stores. I spoke with a gentleman at a shoe store, for example, and he had some questions. We did have Molly Stone's representative attend the meeting, and they were very kind of up to speed and ready to implement the ordinance. But I think Dean Peterson has spoken with some other larger retailers and can maybe also answer your question.
Okay, well, my question is, I want to go clothes shopping.
Yes.
And so I'm frugal, I go to Penny's, and okay, I'm not going to buy a suit, but I might buy some undergarments, a shirt, a pair of pants or something. What kind of bag am I going to have? Am I supposed to bring a reusable bag?
That is correct.
Okay.
You would be encouraged to bring a reusable bag, and the store should also have reusable bags available for purchase.
Okay, and I've heard from retailers, they think that that's going to be a security nightmare because people are going to walk into their stores with their own bags. And I go in a grocery store now with a reusable bag, and I load my groceries in it. And then when I come to the checkout stand, I unload.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have to put alarms on socks, on little things now, because people are just, I mean, it's opened themselves up to, to theft, I think, and, security issues. So that would be my concern.
Through the mayor, if I may address that concern. Obviously, shoplifting is a concern of all retailers at any time. Whether you have a backpack, whether you have a purse, you're able to put items into that. We've heard from Target, we've heard from retailers in San Jose, in LA, and also in San Francisco. They have not had an issue, and they have not seen an increase in shoplifting. But again, that is going to be something that they will need to continue to be wary of, as they are in any other businesses. So that could be a side effect. It's something that we will need to monitor. And if we do see that increasing, and we talk with retailers as we go through, again, this ordinance, we always have opportunities to go back and change it, to tweak it, and to make it a better policy if need be.
Along those lines, if I could, so I'm buying $100 worth of clothes, but I'm not going to get a garment bag. I'll pay the 10 cents. So I mean, so that's that's still available. They'll have a bag available for me for 10 cents.
It is up to the retailer's discretion. They do not have to have a bag available, but I would imagine most retailers will offer that as an option for you. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Good. Rico.
Yeah. I have one question to staff, but since you're at the podium, so I don't have to keep coming up and down. I also went to a small retailer and I was asking, were you notified? Answer was yes. Then I said, so how are you planning to keep the records for 3 years? Unaware of that. I said, okay, well, you need to charge the customer, because I'd asked that question. If you don't charge the customer for the bag, you can be fined. Didn't know that either. So I don't know if that was clearly known within the documents that went out to the retailers, but this is just an example. So then, interestingly enough, we talked about bags. So another question came up, why are we charging a dime? I said, well, they say it's to, I guess, behavior modification is a great term, and then it goes up to 25 cents because then people become, as you had said, the dime doesn't seem that relevant, and so then you up it. So I said, okay. So we went through a receipt, and we went through some bags. So his point to me was, as we have 3 different bags here, this is called bag number 4. You can then mark, because there is a barcode nowadays, didn't know that. And this is, for 500 of this, for him, it is a 1.4 cents for this bag, 1.7 cents for this bag, 1.9 cents for this bag. For the plastic bag, that he's not in favor of this, I think he told me it was 2.7. So in essence, it's cheaper here. But his question to me is, Rico, why would I charge people a dime when it doesn't cost me 2 cents? It seems like now we're taking advantage, and then you're going to raise it to 25 cents, and sure, costs will go up. But I really had a hard time explaining that. Why are we making money off the consumer?
Right.
And who is making that money? Right. Is that the business? Then another part of it came up. Well, if somebody comes in here and spends $75 for whatever they buy, I don't want to charge them for the bag. Well, you have to. You could be fined $100 for giving customer service. So he wants to know if me, who owns the business, he does, I don't, he does, and he wants to do that to provide customer service. Maybe he wants to advertise it as such, or maybe he wants to make the determination at the register because he values customer service. He no longer has that option. So these are some of my initial questions.
Okay. Through the mayor, I will attempt to answer those. I may miss a few. I may not have caught everything he had. One question I'd have on those paper bags, are those actually the 40% post-consumer recyclable bags that are required by the ordinance?
I don't know. I'd have to ask.
Right.
I guess that would make the price
those
go
bags
up.
are slightly more expensive. When we looked at that, I mean, without getting into a full rate schedule and identifying what bags were, we did take an average, and we were looking at the larger paper bags, the number 48s or the 86s. I used to be a bag boy years ago, so I remember that from back in the day. These types of bags would really be considered more of a protective bag, something you'd put a bottle of wine in or another glass container to keep it from bumping in and going. Those likely would not be part of what you would be looking at for the cost. It's the larger paper bags with the handles. They are more expensive because they are 40% post-consumer, 100% recyclable, and those on the market are slightly more expensive. We took a look at an average, and we got this number from the Grocers Association. Depending upon the bulk and what you can buy, those bags range anywhere from 8 cents to 15 cents. Some a little more elaborate with writing on it can get more expensive. It was chosen to go with a 10-cent minimum charge. But you're correct. The ordinance does not allow for special promotions for businesses simply to give away the bag. This ordinance is more overall looking at getting society back to a reusable type society, getting away from a single use or a limited use society where we use something once or twice and we simply throw it away. With a number of people in the Bay Area, we simply cannot afford to have that as a sustainable option, and that's the decision that we went with. Does that address the portion of your?
Well, I guess it does. I know I was in Millbrae, and I think it was this bag cost me a dime.
Okay.
This type of size bag.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, and that's something that again, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
But, and that's something that may not have been completely well thought out, but again, without getting into a full rate schedule, which we felt would be really over-encumbering and everyone trying to figure out this size of bag is this much, this size of bag is that much, we figured a minimum charge of 10 cents. It's to change behavior. What they're finding in San Jose, in Los Angeles, around the world that are implementing this, it's getting people to change their behavior. People are not buying. And quite frankly, if I were to buy something that would go into that small a bag, I don't think I would need a bag for that. at something I could carry out in my hands or in my backpack or another bag that I have.
And I appreciate, and maybe I would do the same, but at the same time, you know, everybody has a unique situation.
Sure.
Maybe they have young children they're tending to. Maybe they have some issues that require them. Maybe that this is a more helpful tool. So I want to help the environment, and I want to help move things forward and take care of things. You know, interesting enough, at where I was, I said, well, it's the same thing like you raise a cigarette tax. And he says, no, Rico, Marlboro now has a cigarette called Maverick. So in essence, it's cheaper. So people don't stop smoking. They're just smoking a brand or quality that is not as great. Same thing with alcohol. They can't afford whatever grade, sometimes they go down. So I want to make sure these things are addressed, because what I want to do is I want to help improve things. But I don't want to hinder the community at large. I know you're talking about San Jose, and I know you're talking about LA, but I'm talking about San Bruno now, San Mateo County. And so I need to have some more assurances as we move forward with this, that these type of things are addressed. I know it's about going and checking records during normal business hours. So my question to staff was, whose normal business hours? The proprietor, the shop owner, or the county? It's the county. So I know there's a stipulation to make some mutual agreement. But, you know, when you want to get buy-in, you got to go forward and work with the people that are running a business, are paying the bills, paying people's salaries, and adding value to our community. Went into Trader Joe's. Millbrae asked, hey, how is this going? 50-50. Now, Millbrae's done it for a little bit, but he thinks that there's improvement. So I think it does change, and it is better. But some of these things that I'm initially bringing up, I think, are things that need to be addressed.
Absolutely, and I understand that. And again, the commitment on the county's part, like all of the ordinances that we implement, it's a very soft rollout. We're there to work with the businesses. We're there to figure out what works. We're not going to be punitive, and we need to identify all these issues as we go through, and that's kind of where we are right now. So I appreciate your comments.
I'll pause.
Anyone else? All right. Mr. Rico, did you have a comment?
I had a question. I was talking to a business owner, and he says, can I give him a rebate on the 10 cents? If I charge him 10 cents for the bag, can I give him a 10-cent discount?
No.
I don't know how you answer that question. Does that fall within the rules of the ordinance? It doesn't necessarily accomplish what you want to do, but
anyone else?
thank you.
I think we had a similar discussion, and it was a lot more lively when we talked about the takeout containers. We had a pretty good sized group of people here a number of times, and it was complaints, and we can't do this, and it's going to cost me this, and it won't work, and we can't do this, and we haven't heard a word. And it works for the most part in San Bruno, and that's San Bruno, and this is a county-wide. So I think, is this a real good thing for the environment going forward? I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think when people get used to it, just like we did in San Bruno when we started recycling, huge recycling effort here many years ago, you can see the street corners tonight and how much recycling is being done. And the same thing with San Francisco. San Francisco now have very small garbage cans because they're recycling all of their wet waste, all of their dry waste, all kinds of things. So yeah, we're going to hit some bumps in the road, and I think as long as it's revisited periodically to, meet the level of the cooperation of what's going on in the future, it's a good thing. So overall, sure, there's always going to be, little questions here or there, and we'll have to work through that. But I think in the bigger picture, this is the right way to go. So I definitely support this.
Yeah, and through the chair, even though I wanted to do some homework to better understand, I'm in favor of this, but I'm also in favor of doing it the right way. And I know it's not always a one-size-fits-all, and I just really want to be mindful, just like the automatic 25-cent to go automatically. There's no, I want it revisited. I want, when these questions are asked to me, and let's just, argument's sake, say it's 3 cents. Where is the extra money going? Is it going to whom? So in essence, it's more, It costs more to do business. I know the other communities are doing the same. But I think these are some real good questions that were brought up by this person.
Absolutely. I do know that San Jose is revisiting the 25 cents at this point because, again, the behavior has changed well for the 10 cents. So that's something that we definitely have on the horizon. We will make sure that, and trust me, my Board of Supervisors is asking the same question, and they want to make sure that when this is getting ready to go to 25 cents, that I can be there proving that we have to do it. And unless I have that proof, we're not going to do it. So, yeah. So, and we want to, in fact, tonight I was down in Menlo Park. One of their council members had a very good suggestion for looking at, future changes to the ordinance as we look at this, and so we definitely need to do this. This is a product of 24 cities getting together in their minds, coming up with a policy that was going to work, and then we can start tailoring as we do. Those are issues we definitely will address them. Thank you.
Just feel a little better.
Okay. Just so we get this right, because I think there was a little confusion the last time this was brought up, the action requested is a motion to waive the second reading?
Correct.
All right, and then introduce the ordinance?
To adopt the ordinance.
To adopt the ordinance, okay.
I move we waive the second reading.
A motion second to waive the second reading on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'd like to introduce adopt. And introduce the resolution. No, it's an ordinance.
The ordinance.
It's an ordinance, yes. I'd like to adopt, introduce the adoption of the ordinance.
No, it's
we don't
to
do
adopt.
Adoption.
Adopt the ordinance?
It's to adopt the ordinance.
All right, I'd like to do that. We don't do ordinances very often, so.
Vice Mayor O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar. Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Item number 11, we already had item 11 a little earlier. Item 12, comments from council members. Anyone? Item 13, closed session. There is no closed session this evening. Item 14, adjournment. The next regular city council meeting will be held right here, February 12th, 2013 at 7 p.m. This meeting is adjourned.